Good morning. How's everyone doing today? Lancey, nice to see you. It is very nice to be with you this morning. As you can tell by now, we are in our Consumed series, which is all about finances. And so far in this series, we've spoken a little bit about the problem with finances. And Wes last week spoke about the discontentment that often comes with this increased awareness in our society. And so this morning, we want to unpack two topics that I know everyone hates speaking about, and that is breaking up with our money. Okay, so this morning, I don't know, are the kids still here that did? No, they're not. I thought that was pretty incredible. I don't know where they got that financial advice from, because I didn't have that when I was a kid. And I remember so clearly my first experience that I had with money as a kid. Maybe I had one earlier. This is the earliest one I can remember. And that is of me and my friends. We would take our little savings, our coins, and we would walk down to the ice cream shop and buy ice creams. But the only ice cream we could ever afford was the little single scoop, tiny little ice creams from the shop. Until one day when me and my friends went down to the shop, and as I walked into the shop, there was this really kind old man that looked at me, and he handed me a 20 Rand note. Now, this was in South Africa, so 20 Rand notes is not worth $20, but still, it was the most money that I had ever held in my hand. And I remember that moment when I held that 20 Rand note. In that moment, I just became completely consumed with what it could buy me. And so I rushed into the shop, and I remember thinking, actually, I can tell you what I wasn't thinking. In that moment, I wasn't thinking, how do you share 20 Rand evenly between 6 friends? I also wasn't thinking, how do you share 20 Rand equally with yourself across multiple days? My only thought in that moment was, what is the biggest ice cream that I can buy with 20 Rand? It was a big one. I remember I went quite far down the list, and I just ordered the biggest ice cream you could get. And it was one of those, not those normal cones, it was those sugary cones ones. And it was a triple scoop ice creams with toppings and flake, and it was proper scoops. I think that ice cream was about the size of my face, probably at the time. And I remember having that ice cream, walking out the store, and just feeling like I have arrived in life, like I could die now and I'd be happy. And that lasted for about 10 seconds, because then what happened was I walked out the ice cream store, and I joined up with my friends outside, and I felt so horrible, because there I was with my massive triple scoop sugary cone ice cream. And I looked around, and all my friends were sitting, eating their little single scoop ice cream in the normal cone. And I felt so horrible. And I remember thinking that this ice cream, because I ate it, but I remember thinking this ice cream is not as good as I thought it was going to be. Because I didn't share it with anyone. I was just sitting there with my massive cone, and they had their tiny little ice creams. And I felt so bad. And so the question that I want to ask you this morning is this. Is your money bringing you and those around you as much joy and happiness and meaning as it could? Is your money bringing you and those around you as much joy and happiness and meaning as you thought it would? See, that day that I got money for the first time, I didn't realize it at the time, but I had entered what would become a lifelong relationship with money. And I would imagine all of us have entered willingly into a relationship with money. Now, the thing about relationships, and you might know this from personal experience or maybe a friend or a family member, there are times when we enter a relationship and our loved ones, everyone around us, can tell us that this is not a healthy relationship. Isn't it true that our loved ones can often see there are some red flags, there are some caution flags, and yet the person in the relationship can often be completely oblivious to that, because we get blinded by love. And so in our relationship with money, it might be worth every now and then just pausing and asking ourselves, am I giving more than I'm receiving in my relationship with money? Because if this is the case, then we are in a toxic relationship with our money. Now, some of the things that we give, and this list will look a bit different for all of us, that we give in our relationship with money is time. We give an awful lot of time in our relationship with money. We give energy. We give worry and stress. We often sacrifice relationships, spending time with loved ones in order to make more money. How often do we sacrifice contentment and peace in our relationship with money? And we do this through this little feeling that I think most of us would be familiar with, that we feel when our friend goes on a holiday and we can't afford one. When our friend buys the house that we wanted to buy, but we couldn't. When someone gets something that we wanted, and it's this tiny feeling of jealousy and greed and discontentment. And in that moment, we are sacrificing our contentment and our peace in our relationship with money. Some of us are sacrificing doing what we love in order to do a job that pays well. And that list can continue. You can fill in the blank. We are giving an awful lot in our relationship with money. But money does repay us in some ways. Money often brings about social status or significance, which is why we love to make money. Money often meets a need in our life, a physical and emotional need. It hides an insecurity for a while, which is why we love to spend money. Money also provides security that we all crave, which is why some of us like to save money. Money can bring about an awful lot of things. You can complete that list for yourself. But really, the truth of it is that all of us hope in our relationship with money that we would get to a place of stress-free abundance, where we can sit and say, money does not add a single worry to my life. You know what? I am content. I'm content with how much money I make, with how much money I save, with how much money I spend, with how much money I give. I am content. In fact, money is providing me with a stress-free, jealousy-free, discontentment-free relationship with life. How many of us can say that about our money? And so this morning, I want to read you just a single verse to start with that God actually said when his people, when the Israelites were in a toxic relationship with money. This is the way he described the relationship that the Israelites found themselves in. And see if you relate to this in any way. God said, you have planted much, but you have harvested little. You eat, but you never have enough. You drink, but you never have your fill. You put on clothes, but you are not warm. You earn wages only to put them in a purse with holes in it. This morning, Wes was kind enough to lend me his wallet. It looks something like this. And this is a great wallet, but really the illustration that God gives to his people is that your relationship with money looks something like this, where you try and make more money, and yet it just falls through. It never feels enough. You try and save money to give you security, and yet it just falls through. It never feels enough. You try and, this time it is real money. You try and earn more money or spend more money to meet a need, and yet it never feels enough. It never satisfied. It's kind of like running on a treadmill, trying to get to your goal, and you never quite reach it. And then God asks his people essentially this question: are you ready to break up with money? Are you ready for a different relationship with money? And so the story we're going to look at today is God really offering an incredibly practical and simple solution to this money problem that we experience. I do want to warn you, if you are still figuring the God thing out, if you are not sure if you believe in God, this might seem a bit extreme. Actually, if you are a Jesus follower, this might seem a little bit extreme. But I'll share with you the advice, the secret, the solution that God offered his people, and you can decide if that is something you want to try in your life. So the context of the story with the Israelites, the people of God, is this, that they had been taken into slavery, and so they were living in slavery for about 70 years before they were allowed to go back to their city of Jerusalem. However, they found their city in ruins. They found their houses destroyed, the temple destroyed. There was nothing left for them. And so slowly but surely they start rebuilding the city, but they all started with their own houses. And so they were rebuilding their own houses as you would imagine they would. But then it got to the place where their houses were complete, and yet the temple of God, the place that was meant to benefit everyone, the place that represented their relationship with God, still remained in ruins. But no one felt they could dedicate any time to that because everyone was trying to better and improve their own lives and their own houses. And so this is where we pick up the story, and this is what God says. He says, these people, my people, they say that the time has not yet come to rebuild God's house. But then the word of the Lord came through the prophet Haggai, and he said, is it a time for you yourselves to be living in your paneled houses while this house remains in ruins? The relationship with money that God describes is one that may feel familiar to us. It's this place where they were also focused on building their own lives, their own careers, making more money, spending more money, doing all of this, and yet they neglected the place that would be of benefit to everyone. They neglected their own relationships with God. And God's saying this way where you're torn between your own pursuits and God's pursuits is just no way to live your life. It doesn't bring you the freedom that you'd hoped for. And the people's response to that is, we're going to build the house, it's just not the right time yet. The time has not yet come to rebuild God's house. How often do we find ourselves in a place where we say, God, I'm going to do what you called me to do, it's just not the right time for me now. I saw that need, I saw that place where there's a need, I know I can just make a donation online, I know it's easy, and yet I still have my own things to do. I still have those shoes that I want to buy. I still have my expenses. You know, it's this place where we're constantly torn between where God's leading us and our own pursuits and our own desires. My dad told me a story the other day. He works at a hotel, and he said he met this older man the other day that shared his life story with him. And the man said that when he was younger, when he was in his 20s, he went to Australia to go work on the oil rigs because he could get lots of money from it. And so he went over there, and he said to himself, I'm just going to work there for 2 years, and then I'm going to come back. And then 2 years passed, and he knew he should have come back for his family, but he said, just 2 more years. The money's too good. I can't give it up now. Just 2 more years. And after those 2 years, he said, 2 more. And he kept saying that because he couldn't let go of the money that he was earning. And he neglected all his other family and things back home. And then he found himself before long close to retirement, and he realized that he had millions of dollars in the bank. He could do whatever he wanted, and yet he had no one to share it with because he always said that the time is not yet right. How often do we put off what we know to be true within ourselves, that we know is the right thing to do, that we know is the most helpful thing to do, but we put it off because the time never feels right? The story continues, and this is where God says, the verse that I read before, give careful thought to your ways. You have planted much, but harvested little. You eat, but you never have enough. You drink, but you never have your full. You put on clothes, but you are not warm. You earn wages only to put them in a purse with holes in it. And then God says, give careful thought to your ways. Go up into the mountains and bring down timber and build my house so that I may take pleasure in it and be honored, says the Lord. And then he ends with this really interesting statement. He says, "You expected much, but see, it turned out to be little. What you brought home, I blew away." I blew away. See, I read that and it seemed very confusing to me. Why these people, they've been in slavery for so long, why would God blow away their blessings? God continues actually in this passage, and he talks about their pursuits of making more money and the olive trees and the grains and everything that they were trying to make more and more money, and it wasn't working. And he actually said, "Don't blame yourselves, blame me. I am the one that's withholding the blessing from your life." Why would a loving God do that? See, I think when it comes to money, money often feels like such a strong foundation. You know, money often feels so strong, so secure, that our pursuits for more, it often feels like the best way we can secure our future. And so we end up building our lives without realizing it on this foundation of trying to make more, save more, spend more. Whatever it is, we always want more because it feels like the only way we can get the security that we long for. And yet, God was saying to the people of Israel, when you really open up money for what it really is, I'm able to blow it away. That I'm able to, in a moment, make all your money disappear, which says something about money, that if God is able to blow it away, then maybe it is not the foundation that we thought it was going to be. And I think the thing about God, a loving and a kind God, he would rather expose our foundation than have us build our whole lives on the wrong foundation. There was this story that I heard when I was a kid. Actually, for my whole life, up until a week ago, I always believed that story was in the Bible, and it never was. I just heard that story, and it made such an impact on me as a kid. And I went to Wes a couple of weeks ago, and I said to him, "The story's in the Bible. I can't find it anywhere." And he had actually heard that same story a week or two before that from a book, but it wasn't in the Bible. But it was a story about a man. It turned out he was a Japanese man named Koda, which would have told me it wasn't in the Bible. But it's this Japanese man named Koda who was the best builder in all of Tokyo. He actually put so much effort and thought and heart into building the most beautiful houses for people. The thing that made Koda such a good builder was the fact that he really invested in the foundation of the house. He invested in the things that people couldn't see. He laid the best foundation, he chose the best materials, and he built people these incredible houses. And he did that throughout his whole career, and he had built up this incredible reputation of a kind, caring builder. And then it got to the place where he was about to retire, and he said to his boss, "Boss, I'm done now. I've spent my whole life building houses. It's time for me to go and spend time with the wife and the kids and my grandkids. I'm retiring now." And his boss said to him, "Koda, I understand you've been incredibly faithful and loyal. Can I just ask you one more favor? There's this important client, and there's one more house that we would love for you to build." And Koda was reluctant, and he didn't want to do it, and he just wanted to retire. But he reluctantly said yes, and he said, "I'll do it, one more house." And so he built this house, but this house was different because he no longer had the heart and the care and the soul that he poured into it. In fact, Koda was starting to cut some corners, and he would lay a foundation, but it really wasn't the strongest foundation. And he would make the house look good on the outside, but he knew structurally he had cut some corners, and it wasn't a great house, but he just wanted to be done. And so he finished that house, and he went to his boss, and he said, "Boss, I'm done now. This was my last house. I'm retiring now." And as he started walking away, clearing his desk, his boss said to him, "Koda, actually, there's just one more thing." And at this point, his heart sank because he's like, "I just want to go home. What is it?" And his boss said to him, "Koda, actually, for all the years of faithful service that you've given us, we wanted to give you a gift. And here are the keys. The last house that you were building was not for someone else. The last house that you built was your own. I wonder how many of us spend so much time and effort and heart and energy building this house that we think will provide us the best and most secure future by always trying to save more, earn more, make more, spend more, that we hope will give us the life that we desire. And yet, it's the house over here, the house that we're building for God, the house that we're investing in other people, that this is the house that we get to live in. And yet, this is often the house that we give the least of our attention and our heart and our effort to. See, the people of Israel, they got this. They got this, and this story actually ends where they decide to leave their own home improvements and actually start investing their best efforts into God's house. See, in this tension that a lot of us find ourselves in between building where God is leading us and building our own house and our own dreams and our own desires, God had a solution for that. It's a solution that He offered both in this passage, which we're going to end with today. But before I do that, I want to share you the solution that God also offered through Jesus, who would live many years later. And Jesus would notice this tension that people would live in, and He would tell them, and this is the verse we shared in the first week, that you cannot serve both God and money. This place where you live torn between these two houses is no way to live. And then He continues His teaching, and then He makes the statement that really is the solution to our money problem. And it's so simple and yet so incredibly profound. Jesus looks at His people and He says this. He says, "But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." Jesus is saying is, when we come and we invest ourselves fully into this house, everything we need will be given to us as well. See, I used to always read this verse as seek first building this house and then go and pursue your house. Put life in the right priorities, build this house, and then go and invest in the things that you want to do. But that's actually not what Jesus is saying. He's not saying, give me some of your time and then go and do your own things. Jesus is actually challenging us and saying, seek this kingdom, seek building my house, and actually all your energy can go towards this, because everything else you need will be given to you as well. And the solution that Jesus had for our money problem might sound very extreme, but it's this: to honor God with 100% of our money. See, this seems so extreme, and yet I think God said this because He knew that the percentage of our money that we hold on to ends up being the percentage that's holding on to us. As soon as we give God a little bit of our time, a little bit of our effort, a little bit of who we are still responsible for the rest. And that's what's causing us anxiety and worry and stress. And that's withholding us from living that abundant life that we all desire. So the solution Jesus had was really to honor God with 100% of our finances. I was chatting to someone the other day who shared their story with me. And I want to wrap up with this story before we do the last few applications that really Jesus had for His people. And I was chatting to someone the other day who told me that their whole lives, they were trying to really build their own house. They were serving God, and yet they felt it was their responsibility to secure their own future and provide for their family. And their goal was never to be rich or wealthy, but without realizing it, they had made money their foundation. Until one day, because of something that happened outside of their control, all their money got blown away and they lost everything. And it was in that season that they said to God, God, I'm done trying to manage my own money. I am surrendering everything to you. And they told me, and I wrote down exactly what they said to me. They said, I cannot tell you the freedom that comes from surrendering 100% of your finances to God. And that person now lives with the mindset that everything I need, I have, and everything I don't have, I don't need. And they are living the abundant, the free, the carefree, stress-free, drama-free life and relationship with money that we all crave. And it started by actually saying, God, I want to honor you with 100% of my finances. So I want to end today, and I want us just to look at what that looks like, because that sounds great, but the reality is all of us still have to live our lives. We've got families to take care of. We've got expenses. We've got lives to run. What does it actually look like to honor God with 100% of our finances? And next week, we're going to unpack that a little bit more as well. But to end off today, I want to share with you the 4 steps really in this passage that God had for his people, the 4 key things that they had to do in order to break free from this toxic relationship with money. The 4 things God said to his people, 4 instructions he gave. He said, give careful thought to your ways. Go up into the mountains, bring down timber, and build my house so that I may take pleasure in it and be honored, says the Lord. These 4 steps were actually the 4 parts of today's message, where at the start, God is inviting us to take stock, to give careful thought to our ways. This is where I asked the question, is your money, what was the question? Is your money, something like, is your money providing the freedom and the joy that you hoped that it would? To take stock and say, are we in a relationship where our money is providing us with freedom? The second thing God invites his people to do is to go up into the mountains. And I think for us, this represents this elevated perspective that God is inviting us into. Where over here, culture tells us that we can spend as much as we want and do whatever with our money. It's ours to use. And God is inviting us to a different perspective where we look at things differently, where we receive God's perspective on it. And really, this perspective is challenging because it says that really we obtain financial freedom by honoring God with 100% of our money. And then the third one, and this is where it gets more practical. God tells us to bring down the timber from up in the mountains. See, this I think is really the most practical, but also the most challenging step in our relationship with money. Because see, this timber is just potential at this point. This timber can become anything you want it to be. This timber is really our paychecks that we receive. It's our investments that we have. It's our savings that we have. And this is the time where we get to choose where we're going to surrender this timber. On the one hand, we've got our own dreams, our own pursuits, our own things. And on the other hand, chances are, if you're a Jesus follower, that there is something in your heart where God might be challenging you as it relates to your finances. There might be something that he's calling you to do, somewhere he's calling you to give, something he's challenging you to change. And this really is the step where we choose whether we're going to surrender what we have over there or where God is leading us. And then the final step, God invites his people to build his house. Now, this is the step that I think really is going to look different for all of us. Because when we choose to surrender our finances to where God is leading us, for some of us, he might challenge us to give more. For some of us, he might challenge us to spend more. Maybe you You've had real challenge trusting God with your finances, and maybe He's going to challenge you to spend more. Maybe He's going to challenge you to spend less. Maybe He's going to challenge you to save more. Maybe you're really having trouble saving, and He's going to challenge you to do that. Maybe He's going to challenge you to save less. Maybe you've been holding on to your savings for so long, and He might challenge you to save less. Maybe He might be calling you to a job where you earn more. Maybe He might be calling you to a place where you earn less. This really is a place where we allow God to challenge us, to challenge our assumptions, to lead us in whatever way He chooses. And it's in this place really that we obtain true financial freedom, because it's no longer us in charge, but it's God's money that we're simply managing. And so we're going to wrap up today, and next week we're going to be chatting a little bit more about some practical steps and tools. But really at the heart of today's message, it's so incredibly simple that God's solution for our money problem, where we are constantly torn between our pursuits and God's, is quite simply this principle: to honor God with 100% of our finances, and then to simply build where He leads and see wherever that takes us. So this morning I'd love to end with a prayer for us, if that's okay. God, we are so incredibly grateful that You are a God of abundance. You're a God that provides. And God, thank You that there is enough provision for all of us in Your kingdom. Thank You that there is enough, that You're a God of enough. And God, I pray that in that tension that we all experience between building where You're leading, building Your house, and building our own, and just getting more and more for ourselves, God, I pray You teach us the principle of surrender, where we can say, God, I want to honor You with everything that I have and everything that I am. And so this morning, God, it is our prayer that You help us to build the right house. We don't want to spend our whole lives building a house that never truly mattered. And so I pray You lead us into true significance, where the house that we're building is Your house, and it's a house of significance and a house that matters. Is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.